Hello everyone, 大家好, it's Jeffrey here. Welcome to Outtro, a place where you can find useful information to help you learn Cantonese Chinese as a foreign language. In this video, we're going to learn some Jyutping, and more specifically, the Plosive Onsets. Ready? 嚟㗎咯喎! Okay, before actually starting on the plosive onsets, I have to make an apology here because in my previous video where I gave an introduction on Jyutping, I've made a mistake there. At the very end of the video where I talked about the character, where the NG sound could possibly be an onset or a coda, I told you it's an onset, but in fact it's a coda. Although it's still the NG sound with the fifth tone, the fact that it's an onset or a coda would not affect how it's pronounced or written, but it's ultimately my responsibility to give the correct information here. So apologies, the NG sound in that should be a coda, but not an onset. Alright, back to the topic. Plosive onsets. What are they? Plosives, by definition, are the consonants which the sounds are produced by first stopping the airflow, followed by a sudden release of air. And remember, the timing of releasing the airflow actually decides what the sound you're pronouncing. The main differences between three pairs are which parts of the body you're using to stop the airflow. Let's start with the bilabials. The B sound and the P sound in Cantonese belong to this pair. For bilabial plosives, the airflow is stopped by closing your lips together. First, we have the B sound. We have the example of ba, as in ba si, bus, ba. To pronounce the B sound, first we have to stop the airflow by closing the lips as mentioned. And then, we make the sound and open the lips at the same time. Ba, ba. It is worth noting that the B sound in Cantonese is not identical to the B sound in English. For example, let's say the word bingo, bingo. I actually started vibrating my vocal cord before I even opened my lips, bingo. But it would be weird to pronounce the B sound the same way in Cantonese, like ba si, ba si. It would be weird, so we just say ba si. Release the airflow and pronounce the sound at the same time. Instead, I would say the B sound in Cantonese sounds more like the P sound in Latin languages, like French, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian. Speaking of that, we'll move on to the P sound in Cantonese. The P onset, for example, the word pa begins with the P onset, as in pa dai, pa dai, to lie on the belly. To pronounce the P sound, again we stop the airflow by closing the lips together, but this time we release the lips before actually making the sound. Pa, pa. Alright, now let's move on to the next pair of plosive onsets, the alveolar-dental. For alveolar-dental onsets, we stop the airflow by placing the tongue behind the upper teeth, behind the alveolar ridge. That's exactly the ridge of flesh behind your upper teeth. Okay, so the D and T onsets in Cantonese belongs to this pair. For the D sound, like in do, as in do zhe, which means thank you. Do zhe, do. To properly pronounce the D sound, we place the tip of the tongue behind the upper teeth, like here, and then we make the sound and releasing the airflow at the same time. Do, do. Again, the D onset in Cantonese is not exactly how the D onset in English sounds like. Let me try to compare them and you know. For instance, in English we have the word door, like the door which you open and close. Door, door. And in Cantonese, do, do. Notice the difference? If you're struggling to pronounce the D onset in Cantonese, I would recommend you to put the tip of your tongue a bit more behind than how you would pronounce the D onset in English. A bit more behind, like do, door, so you won't make the door sound, okay? Next up, we have the T onset, like T in 拖, as in 拖手, to hold hands. And the main difference of pronouncing the D and the T onset is to read the T sound, you only make the sound after you release the tongue. 拖, in slow motion, right? 拖. Note that the T sound in Cantonese also does not sound like the T onset in English. Like if a person or a building, it is tall, but you won't say 拖手 in Cantonese. Well, if you pronounce it this way, like 拖手 in Cantonese, most likely people will still understand you, but it's a bit weird. Coming to the last pair of plosive onsets, we have the velar ones, which are the G sound and the K sound. For the velar ones, we stop the airflow by holding the back of the tongue near the palate. The exact action like you would do when you're gargling. You sort of hold the sound at the back of your throat, and that's what it feels like. The G sound, like in gu, as in 蘑菇, mushroom, 蘑菇. To correctly pronounce the G sound, you hold the sound at the back of your tongue near the palate, and then you make the sound and release the airflow at the same time. Gu. Also in such case, the G onset is a bit different from its English counterpart. You don't make the sound before you release the tongue, like in English you would say a game, but you won't say gu, mo, gu in Cantonese. It's very weird to do so. And lastly, we have the K onset. We have the K onset in the character ku, as in 頭箍, a headband. 頭箍. Like the G sound, you pronounce the K sound by first holding the sound at the back of your tongue near the palate in your throat. But the difference is, you make the sound only after you release the airflow. Ku, slow motion again. Ku. Alright, now I've introduced 6 plosive onsets in Cantonese, and it's time to test how much you understand them. For each of the 3 pairs of plosive onsets, I will read 3 different phrases, and I will also show you the Jyutping, but without the onsets. And you, upon listening to how I read the phrases, you'll have to determine which onsets belong to which characters. First, let's start with the bilabials. The first phrase is 擺平, 擺平, which means to settle. The second phrase is 跑步, 跑步, which means to run or to jog. And the last one, you might not be hearing it that often in Hong Kong, but it's more popular among Cantonese speakers in Malaysia or perhaps in Singapore as well. And that is 邊皮, 邊皮, which means the side, the edge, or the peripheral in general. And here are the answers. Have you got them right? Don't worry if you've missed 1 or 2, just go back and listen to them one more time and try to find out which part you might be misunderstanding, and try to spot the subtle differences between the 2 onsets, especially on the timing when the vocal cord actually starts vibrating and making the sound. So you have to notice, is it the same time when I open my lips, or is it after it? Moving on, we have the Alveolar-dental pair, which is the D sound and the T sound. And the first phrase is 台凳, 台凳, which means tables and chairs. And the second phrase is, ooh, my favorite here, 蛋撻, 蛋撻, which means the egg tart. And the last one is 掉頭, 掉頭, which is to make a U-turn. Okay, here are the answers. Congratulations if you got all of them correct, but don't be disappointed if you don't. They are a bit tricky. Go back and listen to them one more time and try to spot the subtle differences between the D onset and the T onset. You can do it. Finally, we have the Velar pair, the G sound and the K sound. The first phrase is 求救,求救,求救, which means to ask for help. The second phrase is 擒高,擒高,擒高, which means to climb up. And the final phrase is 假期,假期,假期, which means holiday. And here are the answers. Again, if you don't get the answers right, don't worry. Go back and listen to it a few more times, and I'm sure you can get the difference. And that's it. You've already learned 6 of the 19 available onsets in Cantonese. That's almost a third of them. Let me know in the comments if you find any concepts in the video particularly difficult or you're struggling to understand. Thank you for watching, but before you leave, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also follow us on Instagram. I'll see you in the next video. 我哋下條片見，拜拜啦！真係想食蛋撻添。